Emily Carter pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the car window as the moving truck rumbled ahead of them. The summer air smelled faintly of cut grass and hot asphalt, and the sight of Willow Creek stretched before her like something out of a real estate brochure. Tree-lined streets. A diner with a neon sign buzzing faintly in the daylight. Kids wobbling on bikes, while their parents mowed perfect lawns. It was the kind of place where nothing bad could ever happen, or so Emily told herself. In the back seat, baby Clara fussed in her car seat. A thin cry bubbled out of her, and Emily reached back with one hand, gently rocking her tiny foot through the blanket. "Almost there, sweetheart," she whispered. David grinned from the driver's seat, glancing at her through his aviator sunglasses.
"She's tougher than she looks."
"You both are." Emily tried to smile, but her exhaustion was bone deep. She hadn't slept a full night since Clara's birth, and the move had drained her last bit of energy. Still, David was right. This was supposed to be a new start. The house appeared at the end of Ashwood Lane, tucked between two maples that bent toward it like watchful parents. A colonial style, pale blue with white trim. Its wraparound porch sagged slightly but had charm. The real estate agent had called it cozy, with character. To Emily, it looked like hope. They carried boxes inside, setting them down in rooms that smelled faintly of dust and old wood polish. Clara's nursery was upstairs, a small room with slanted ceilings and a single window overlooking the backyard. The crib, a second-hand oak piece Emily had scrubbed and polished herself, sat waiting against the far wall. As Emily laid Clara down, she felt a strange sensation, like the air in the room was heavier. Not oppressive, just different. She shook it off. New house smells, she told herself. Old floorboards. Settling walls. David wrapped his arms around her shoulders from behind. "This is it," he murmured. "Our forever home." Emily nodded, though unease stirred somewhere deep in her chest. That night, after dinner of takeout pizza eaten on the floor, they collapsed into bed. Clara fussed on and off, but eventually drifted to sleep in the nursery. Emily woke hours later to a sound, a soft giggle, carried through the baby monitor. It wasn't Clara's laugh. Her baby was only 3 months old. She'd barely started smiling. This sound was lower, rougher, almost playful. Emily sat up, heart racing. "David," she whispered, shaking him. "Do you hear that?" But David only groaned, turning onto his side. Emily crept down the hall, each creak of the floorboards too loud in the midnight quiet. She pushed open the nursery door. Clara slept peacefully, her lips twitching faintly, as if dreaming. Emily exhaled, pressing a hand to her chest. She must have imagined it. Sleep deprivation, stress, the 1,000 worries of new motherhood. Still, as she turned to leave, she swore she heard it again. A giggle, too low, too sharp, and this time, it seemed to come from inside the walls. The next morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen window as Emily poured cereal into a bowl. Clara was in her bouncer seat on the table, gurgling softly, clutching the ear of her stuffed rabbit. David leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee. "So," he said, "first night in the new place. How was it?" Emily hesitated. She almost told him about the sound, the giggle that didn't belong, but the words caught in her throat. If she said it out loud, it would sound ridiculous. Worse, it might sound like she wasn't coping. She'd read enough parenting blogs to know about postpartum anxiety, about hallucinations from sleep deprivation. "Fine," she said finally, forcing a smile. But her eyes drifted toward the ceiling, toward the nursery. By the second night, the scratching began. It was faint at first, like the scurrying of a mouse behind the walls. Emily mentioned it at breakfast. "Old house," David said with a shrug. "Probably critters in the walls. I'll set traps." But as the days passed, the sound grew sharper, more deliberate. Not the random skitter of rodents, but a steady scrape, like fingernails dragging across wood. It came from different places, under the crib, inside the closet, from the ceiling beams above Clara's head. always following Clara's gaze. Emily would rock her daughter and notice the way the baby's eyes fixed on corners of the room, tracking something invisible. Sometimes Clara's lips would twitch, not quite a smile, but as if she recognized whatever it was. One evening, as Emily folded laundry in the bedroom, she heard the scratching start again. Her skin prickled. She stepped into the hall, listening. The sound wasn't just behind the walls anymore. It was moving, crawling from the nursery, down the hallway ceiling, toward her. Her breath came shallow. Then Clara giggled. Not the low, wrong laugh from before, but her actual baby giggle, sweet, high-pitched. Relief flooded Emily until she realized Clara wasn't in the hall. She was upstairs, in her crib. Emily froze. The giggle had come from directly behind her. Sleep came in fractured pieces. Emily would drift off, only to jolt awake to the hiss of the baby monitor, or the faint echo of nails against wood. By the fourth night, she was running on fumes. At 3:14 a.m., the monitor went dead silent. No static, no hum, just absence. Emily sat bolt upright. Something inside her knew that silence was worse than noise. She sprinted barefoot down the hallway and pushed the nursery door open. The crib was empty, her body locked up, breath frozen. Her baby, her Clara, was gone. Then she saw her. Clara stood in the far corner, impossibly balanced on unsteady legs. She was only 3 months old, far too young to stand. Yet there she was, straight-backed, poised. Her small head turned toward Emily, and the dim nightlight caught her face. The eyes, black, not like pupils dilated in darkness, but an inky liquid void that swallowed all light. And then that grin. It stretched too wide across her tiny face, splitting her features into something grotesque, a parody of joy. "Clara?" Emily whispered, her voice cracking. The baby's mouth opened, but the sound that came out was not hers. It was deep, guttural, scraping the air like broken glass dragged across concrete. A voice that did not belong to this earth. "You've invited me in." The overhead light flickered violently. The crib rattled against the floorboards. The door slammed shut behind Emily, trapping her in. She staggered backward, pressing against the wall. Her heart hammered so loud she thought it might burst. Clara, or the thing inside her, took a single step forward. Her tiny bare foot pressed flat against the floor with a sound too heavy, as if a grown man had taken the step. The ancient voice rumbled again through her baby's lips. "This house is mine now." Emily screamed, loud enough to wake David. The lights flared back on. Clara was in the crib again, lying on her back, cooing softly as if nothing had happened. Emily's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the floor, hands shaking violently. When David rushed in seconds later, she couldn't explain. Words stuck in her throat, jumbled, incoherent. He found her sobbing against the crib, while Clara slept peacefully. David said, kneeling beside her, "You're scaring me. What happened?" She really tried to tell him, but the words made her sound insane. Black eyes, grin, a voice through our baby. Instead, she shook her head. I just thought she wasn't in the crib." David hugged her tightly. "You're exhausted. We both are. It's okay." But as he rocked her gently, Emily's eyes locked on Clara. The baby was staring at her mother. And for the briefest moment, Emily swore she saw the corners of her daughter's lips curl upward again, just enough to show that too wide smile. The days blurred together. Emily tried to hold on to the rhythms of motherhood: feedings, naps, laundry, but every routine was pierced by something unnatural. The baby monitor hissed with bursts of static that carried whispers. Shadows shifted in the nursery even when the curtains were drawn tight. And then came the mirrors. It started with the bathroom mirror. Emily leaned in one morning, bleary-eyed, brushing her teeth. Clara lay on a towel by the sink, cooing. When Emily glanced into the mirror, she froze. Her reflection was wrong, not hers. Behind her,
where Clara lay. The glass showed a child older, maybe 10 years old, her skin pale, her eyes hollow. The child's lips moved.
Emily whipped around. Clara kicked happily on the towel. The older child was gone. But when Emily turned back to the mirror, the girl remained, whispering. She dropped the toothbrush, stumbling back. The whispers grew louder, threads of sound slithering under her skin. She couldn't make out the words until she leaned closer. Blood, sleep, forever, Emily shrieked, yanking Clara into her arms and rushing out. That night, David found her curled on the couch, rocking the baby in silence. She told him what she'd seen. He held her hand, rubbing her knuckles. "Mirrors play tricks when you're tired," he said gently. "Lack of sleep. Stress our minds see things." But his voice lacked conviction. His eyes darted toward the darkened hallway mirror as if he feared what might be staring back. It wasn't long before other people noticed. Emily's best friend, Rachel, came by one afternoon with a casserole. She cooed at Clara, tickling her tiny chin. Clara stared back with an intensity that made Rachel pull her hand away. "She has a strong gaze," Rachel said, forcing a laugh. "Feels like she's looking through me." Emily nodded stiffly. By the time Rachel left, her smile was strained. She didn't come back. Neighbors waved less often. Some crossed the street instead of walking past their house. Dogs strained at their leashes, whining and clawing to avoid stepping onto the lawn. At night, Emily heard howls ripple through the neighborhood, as if every animal sensed what was festering inside the house on Ashwood Lane. David grew desperate. He called Father Matthews, the parish priest. The priest arrived with a leather Bible tucked under his arm, his face drawn and pale. In the nursery, he dipped a finger into holy water and pressed it against Clara's forehead. The sizzle was audible. Father Matthews staggered back, dropping the vial. His lips trembled. This is not of God." He backed out, crossing himself violently. By the time David chased him to the porch, the priest was already fumbling with his car keys, refusing to look back. Doctors said Clara was healthy, perfectly normal, but their eyes lingered too long on her. Some frowned, uneasy, as if catching something in her gaze they couldn't put into words. Emily found a psychic online. The woman demanded $500 in advance. When she stepped into the nursery, she lasted only seconds before letting out a scream that rattled the window panes. She clawed at her own eyes, shrieking, "It's looking back. Oh God, it sees me," before bolting out the front door. Even David couldn't dismiss it anymore. "What the hell do we do?" he whispered late one night, sitting with his head in his hands. Emily stroked Clara's hair, though her hands trembled. "We can't keep her here. She doesn't belong here. We have to take her somewhere." Her eyes fell on the calendar pinned to the fridge. A red circle marked Sunday service at the old abandoned church outside town. "Maybe there," she whispered. They left after midnight, hoping the cover of darkness would help them do what had to be done. Emily cradled Clara in the back seat, the baby bundled tight. David gripped the wheel, sweat trickling down his temple despite the cool night air. Clara giggled. The sound was sharp, metallic. It pierced the air like a blade. The windshield cracked straight down the middle. David swore, swerving slightly. "Hold her tight!" But Emily was frozen. The sound wasn't a baby's laugh anymore. It was older, layered, as if multiple voices were laughing together inside her tiny chest. The road stretched on, the same line of trees, the same bent road sign, over and over, as if the car were driving in circles. Hours passed. David's eyes darted to the clock. It had been 4 hours, but the gas tank hadn't moved. The engine sputtered, died. Silence fell. They stepped out. Emily clutched Clara tight against her chest, her arms aching. And then Emily screamed. They were parked in front of their house. Every window glowed red, pulsing as if the house itself had a heartbeat. They rushed inside. The air was suffocating, thick with the smell of scorched hair. The walls were covered in drawings, crude, childlike sketches of the family, each one hung from a noose, faces smeared into grotesque smiles. The crib was empty. Laughter erupted. From upstairs, from the basement, from right behind them. They spun. Clara stood in the hallway, but not alone. Dozens of versions of her filled the house. Some were crawling along the ceiling like insects, heads twisted at impossible angles. Some stood in the doorways, their mouths stretched into two wide grins. Some sat cross-legged on the floor, humming tuneless lullabies. All of them smiled. Emily dropped to her knees, clutching her ears. "Stop," she begged. "Please, stop." But the laughter only grew louder. Neighbors later claimed they saw the flames start from nowhere. One moment the Carter house loomed dark. The next, fire licked from the windows, roaring with unnatural speed. Shadows moved inside the blaze, shapes dancing, arms flailing in grotesque rhythm. The neighbors swore they heard voices in the fire. Some claimed to hear screaming. Others said it was laughter. By the time firefighters arrived, the house was a skeleton of ash. There was no trace of Emily, David, or Clara, not even bones. But as the smoldering wreck hissed in the night air, a sound lingered, soft, delicate, a baby's giggle echoing through the ashes, and a whisper that seemed to crawl into the ears of every witness. "I'll find a new home soon." Months later, a for sale sign vanished from the lawn. A young couple moved in, carrying their newborn son swaddled in a blanket of yellow wool. They were eager, smiling, hopeful. The neighbors waved politely, though some looked uneasy. That night, as the couple set their baby down in the newly painted nursery, a soft sound rippled through the house. A giggle, low, sharp, and far too deep for a baby's throat. The house on Ashwood Lane had chosen again.